welcome to Strictly Money at the Newsroom, where all voices matter. I'm Saijal Patel. Small and medium-sized businesses are no doubt the backbone of our economy and the heart of our communities. And yet, reaching profitability has never been more difficult than it is today for them. Many struggle to find financing, especially if they don't fit into a square box. And now they face higher inflation and interest rates and the prospect of a recession. Well, one company is trying to change that and has built the first inclusive matchmaking platform to help small businesses find the funding and customers they need to grow and prosper. Barry Hillier is CEO of eQuo, and he joins me now. Barry, great to have you on.
Thanks, Saijal. It's been a real pleasure, and really appreciate you highlighting small business.
Yeah, let's talk about this because this is a unique platform, matchmaking platform that connects small businesses with capital and customers and talent, from what I understand. So tell us how this works, and maybe we start with the investment piece first.
No, absolutely. So we're focused on the 1.2 million small businesses that are across Canada. There are also 583 million globally, and most of these businesses tend to be run by founders who are immigrants. They're women, they're Black, they're Indigenous, persons of color, persons with disabilities, persons over 60, or LGBTQ+. And those groups in particular have struggled to find funding. And in particular, this has caused huge issues. And so what we're attempting to do with eQuo is to create a platform that uses heavy metadata tagging as well as algorithms to find alternative resources that include alternative investors, alternative capital providers, alternative banking solutions, and other cash flow solutions. And by finding and matching, what we believe we're going to be able to do is create a solution for that middle ground between startup and high growth companies that is sorely underestimated and underfunded.
Yeah, I'm so glad you mentioned the inclusive part because certainly a lot of the work that I do around trying to close the financial security gap, this is one of the issues that I see, baked in bias sometimes in the system. Why did you start this, Barry? I ask this because typically fintechs disrupt something when they see a gap, or something that's fundamentally broken. What did you see?
Well, first of all, I'm a serial entrepreneur. I've built and I've sold a few companies. And one of the issues that I found was it's really hard to build a company. And I'm an older white man. Mm-hmm. And when you start to talk about all of the groups that I just mentioned, it's exponentially harder. And we need to be able to do something because a top-down approach is not working. Status quo is not working for the majority of businesses. And we're about to approach $100 trillion in global GDP for the first time. And 55 trillion of that is coming from small business, yet it's being ignored. And so we're looking at ourselves as being a bottom-up approach and recognizing that if we can collectively work together, not only do we think we can break status quo, but we can support these founders in a way that will have more than a transactional impact, but a transformational impact globally.
Okay. Barry, we have about a minute and a little bit more than that before the commercial break. Entrepreneurs then, the ones that are coming to you, how do you screen them?
So we're relying on a crowdsourced mentality. So the screening is actually a broader crowd mentality. And so what ends up happening is our algorithms are taking stated data and derived data from not only what the individuals are saying about their company, but how other people are also talking about their company. And in being able to do this, we're getting a much broader ability to not only screen these companies, but to match them with more appropriate options within the ecosystem.
Do they have, do investors actually have access to data, like financial data, or is it just word of mouth?
So we're actually working with the tests on a third party that takes for the entrepreneurs who are willing to provide access to that data. Investors as well as capital providers are able to actually see a much deeper look. But unlike just looking backwards, at, for instance, credit scores. What we're able to do, this third party has 834 separate external data points.
Okay, we're going to take a quick commercial break and we'll continue this conversation. Welcome back. Barry, we've been talking about how you screen entrepreneurs. Yeah. What's in it for the investors? For those that are watching and want to get involved, what benefits do they have, and maybe, how much do they have to invest?
It's a really good question. And when you take a look at accredited investors, and we'll start with the Canadian frame of mind, there are 1 million accredited investors across Canada. Less than 7% of them are part of any organized angel network. So that means there are over 900,000 accredited investors who made their money in manufacturing, in retail, in real estate, agriculture, et cetera. And they're not interested in chasing tech companies and unicorns. They want to find companies that have business models that are realistic to them in industries that they understand. So one of the main things is for those investors, we're able to connect them to the companies that are in those industries that they're looking for. So immediately they're going to start to get deal flow that they weren't getting access to before. So those are the sorts of things that we believe are going to be transformative, because those are also the investors that really aren't able to take part to the extent that they're able to inside of the ecosystem.
SMEs, you heard my introduction. They've struggled a lot in these past few years, right? They had to face the pandemic. Now they're dealing with high inflation and in a high interest rate environment. I'm sure there's lots of companies that are not catching a break. And I wanted to ask you, Barry, what are you hearing and seeing from your perspective?
I think that there's a lot of mental health issues right now, and I think that there are a lot of financial issues, and they're related to one another. The recent interest rate hikes, having to repay some of the government grants, struggling to try and find talent, as well as just managing all the day-to-day operations that were already difficult pre-COVID, are causing some real issues. And so our entrepreneurs need some real support, especially given how much of the spending started to shift during COVID through to Amazon, big box stores, et cetera. As much as people are talking about celebrating and wanting to support small business owners, the real reality of that support needs to transfer into, purchasing and getting people into stores and shopping online.
So tell me how eQuo helps businesses get customers and talent, as you mentioned.
Yeah, so there are a few ways. We view ourselves as really a support community to back small business. One of the things that we're launching right now is called a Go Small Canada campaign. And we're asking people to literally just shop online or in-store, take some photos, take some videos, share why this is such an amazing place in your community that you love to shop in with whatever social media network you want. Add the hashtag Go Small Canada in the city. And in this way, we can not only start to put a highlight on these founders and their businesses, but we can start to drive, hopefully, new revenues and add awareness to some of the amazing businesses out there. And later, that support is going to shift later in the fall, just before the holidays, when the same algorithms that we're using to connect founders to capital and funders and investors, once we grow our platform membership large enough, they're all providing goods and services that somebody else is looking for. So we're going to introduce an equal marketplace, and this is all free. And that's going to allow people to find bookkeepers, to find any type of good or service that you're looking for that's available within our community. And between both of those efforts, we're hoping that that's going to help provide a real stimulant and also show support for these founders.
I think it's a great campaign. And I understand the Mayor of Waterloo has supported this as well. It's across Canada. So for those viewers who are watching, really urge you to participate. And you can see the hashtag Go Small Canada. Barry, we only have about 45 seconds left. what's next for the company? I mean, what's your sort of strategy and growth strategy for the rest of this year and perhaps next?
Yeah, so for this year, we're just working through our alpha currently right now. So our goal is to onboard 5,000 small businesses, 300 investors, and 150 capital providers as part of our closed alpha. In the fall, we're going to be launching then Canada-wide after we've demonstrated proof of concept. Later in the fall, we're introducing our marketplace, and our goal is to then start to expand not only across Canada by the end of 2022. Around Q2 of next year, we then want to start to expand outside of Canada, and we're going to look at a global move.
All right, Barry, we really appreciate you coming on today. Thanks so much. Welcome back to Strictly Money. This is not the retirement I had envisioned. This is what many Canadians living in their golden years are saying in light of today's high inflation and high interest rate environment. And let's face it, managing one's retirement funds is not easy at the best of times, but when you don't have a paycheck rolling in, when you're spending way more than you imagined, and when you see your investments sink, it's stressful. If this is you, stay put, because my next guest has plenty of advice on how you can manage your retirement plan in today's uncertain times. Jason Heath is a fee-only financial planner with Objective Financial Partners, and he joins me now. Jason, great to have you back.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Understandably, right? A lot of seniors are stressed. And the interesting thing is it's high interest rates and high inflation is not something new to them. They've experienced it perhaps decades before, but probably when they were working. So what are your clients asking you about, and what specifically worries them?
Well, it's funny. I've been practicing as a retirement planner for probably 20 years, and I've had more questions about inflation in the last 6 months than I've had in my entire career. I think a big part of that is inflation has been relatively low and under 2% for most of the last 20 or even 30 years. And all of a sudden, we're in a real high interest rate environment or a high inflation rate environment. Another thing that I've noticed as well is investments. Lots of people concerned about their investments. And it's funny because when the pandemic first started back in 2020, stock markets fell a lot more and a lot quicker than what we've seen over the course of the last 6 or so months. But I think because it's been a slower, more drawn out decline in stock markets, it's given more people more time to reflect and worry. And that's certainly coming across in questions and discussions.
Yeah. What are current inflation expectations that retirees do need to consider then, Jason?
Well, I think if we start with where we're coming from, Statistics Canada just came out yesterday and announced inflation hit 8.1% year over year for June. It was actually a little bit below expectations. So I guess that's the good news in an 8% interest rate or inflation environment. Down in the US, 9.1%, the UK is 9.4%, a lot of other countries dealing with the same thing. I think that as far as expectations, it's very unlikely that we're going to see an 8 or 9% inflation environment persist for a long time, not to diminish the impact that it's likely to have on people over the course of the next year or two while the Bank of Canada gets inflation under control. But I think as far as long-term retirement planning, we're more likely to see an inflation rate of 2% over the long run, even if the next couple of years are difficult. And the people I think that are most at risk, frankly, are those who are retired and living off of defined benefit pension plans that are not indexed. So a lot of public sector employees have inflation protection on their pensions, but most private sector pensions, people who work for companies, do not have any inflation protection. In the last year, they've seen 3, 4, 5 years of purchasing power disappear, unfortunately. So hopefully that gets dealt with sooner rather than later.
And that's a question I wanted to ask you, right? Because the revenue side or the income side is pretty much fixed for most people, unless you're working part-time, and that's not realistic for a lot of people. Can they expect a bump up in CPP payments then?
CPP and old age security, the Canada Pension Plan retirement pension is indexed and increased with the cost of living in January. It was only increased 2.7% back this January, but the full inflation that we've seen, particularly in the last 6 months, wasn't baked into that. So we'll likely see a CPP increase next January that is in line with the cost of living increase. Old age securities increased quarterly, actually, so people see their payments go up quarterly, and that provides a degree of inflation protection for all retirees because most of us have some CPP and old age security pension we're entitled to. Investments to a certain extent, both stocks and bonds in the long run benefit from higher inflation. In the short run, we've seen how they have not so far this year. So again, most of us have some inflation protection in our government pensions and in our investments in the long run.
Yeah, and I think that's important to note, although we know that CPP doesn't cover enough of your living expenses, right? It's only really meant to cover about 30% or 40%. Jason, we'll continue this conversation because I want to get into your thoughts on how people can plan for the stock market and the uncertainty there. We're going to take a quick commercial break and we'll be right back. Welcome back. Jason, so we were talking about markets as well. Should investors sell their stocks in anticipation of a recession? And what do you do right now when you see your portfolio, turn into the red?
Yeah, well, look, it's been a tough year for investors, and actually, it's been almost a worse year for conservative investors because the Canadian bond market was down about 12% for the first 6 months of the year. Canadian stocks were only down about 10%. So some more conservative investors have seen bigger losses than the more aggressive ones, which is a strange phenomenon. I think that something to keep in mind is that market timing is very difficult. Even the professionals, picking the right time to buy and sell is about as easy to do, or about as likely as a coin toss. So in order to pick the right time to sell and then pick the right time to buy back in, you need to be right not just once but twice.
Yeah.
So something I'd be inclined to encourage people to consider is, the losses that you've seen in your portfolio so far are temporary losses. They're only permanent if you sell and make them into permanent ones. And I think with lots of people, when you look at their time horizon, even if they're withdrawing from their investment portfolio, they might only be taking out 2, 3, 4, 5% per year. That means the other 95, 6, 7, 8% of your money is still invested in order to recover. So if you're nervous about markets, it's a time to reconsider your risk tolerance, but I don't think to make any sort of a wholesale change and get out of the market. Stocks are already anticipating the bad news. And even once a recession is announced, if that happens, stocks could already be rising in anticipation of a recovery.
Yeah, exactly. Jason, GICs, because nobody wanted to put their money in GICs. They weren't getting a return. Are they a viable option now for investors and especially retirees?
I think so. I think it's part of the bright good news or the silver lining with interest rates going up, that we now do see GIC rates, 5-year rates up over 5%. Even 1 to 4-year GIC rates are well over 4%, and we could see them continue to move higher. Now, that still provides a negative real rate of return when you've got inflation at 8%. If you're earning 5 and inflation's 8, you're minus 3 after an inflation adjustment. But I think the likelihood of inflation staying high, as I mentioned, is low. The Bank of Canada, in their July monetary policy report, suggested that we should be back down to 3% inflation by the end of 2023 and their 2% target by the end of 2024. So inflation, again, is hopefully a short-term phenomenon, but these higher GIC rates, I think, are likely here to stay and are a real viable option for conservative investors that are easy to understand, and finally, for the first time in about 15 years, paying a great interest rate.
I also wanted to ask you, Jason, what about annuities? Are they coming back in favor as well, and would you recommend them?
I wouldn't say they are coming back in favor. They will come back in favor. I think these higher interest rates. I've talked a lot to people about annuities as of late as well. They were big back in the 70s and the 80s when interest rates were more appealing. But I think as interest rates continue to rise and as we've got more baby boomers moving into retirement, an annuity is a product that is provided by an insurance company where you can take a lump sum of money, hand it over to them, and based on your life expectancy and interest rates, they'll make a monthly payment to you for the rest of your life. So higher interest rates mean higher annuity payments, and it's a great way to provide a simple retirement income and insure against the risk of living too long. Because if you live to 110, the annuity keeps on paying. The annuity market in Canada is relatively small, but I think we're going to see demand increase just because of the baby boomer population and higher interest rates. And I think that could be a good thing for the retirement income planning market.
Yeah, and I guess especially for those who get nervous, right? And they want that certainty. It's certainly a viable option. Jason,
For
we really
sure.
appreciate you coming on today. Thanks so much. Well,
My pleasure.
we'll get you back again.
Thank you.
Jason
Thanks,
Heath
Saijal.
of Objective Financial Partners. Well, that wraps up this episode of Strictly Money. You can find previous shows on thenewsforum.ca or subscribe to our YouTube channel. Thanks for watching. Until next time, stay well, stay wise, and stay wealthy.